Hello and welcome to this chat with Mina Guli, who's the CEO of Thirst Foundation, a foundation that's looking to tell people about a water crisis that the planet faces, but is just not apparently too worried about. She's running 200 marathons over a year, and with each marathon, she wants to drive our attention to a point that all of us should be very aware of. But at this point, we just don't care about it. We care about deforestation. We care about a lot of other issues that are there on the planet. But the water crisis is something that we don't care about because perhaps we just can't see it every day in our faces. In India, we've seen this happen to a lot of people. We see it in the villages, but if you're living in the city, it's perhaps not as in your face as it should be. But it's there, and it's something that we should all be very worried about. Hi, Mina. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Mina, you're trying to raise awareness for the issue in a very different way. Of course, you've been doing this for a while, but how does running marathons connect with the entire water conservation effort?
Yeah, I have been doing this for a while. My body is telling me that I've been doing it for a while. You mentioned that this year I'm running 200 marathons. So far, today I ran number 153. So it's getting close to that 200 mark. Close, but not close enough. The reason I'm running is because I want to do three things. I want to raise awareness about the global water crisis. I want to show the urgency of the problem that we're facing. And I want to, most importantly, drive action from companies that represent almost 90% of global freshwater use, either directly or indirectly. I want to drive action from individuals, like each one of us that's, the two of us that are speaking here today and the many people that will watch this after we've recorded it. And I want to drive action from governments like the government of India and the governments of countries all over the world. Because the truth is, what we actually need is action from all of us to solve this global water crisis. A lot of people over the last 24 hours, especially since I've been running in India, have been asking me why running. Running is really important to me for a number of reasons. The first one is that I want to show that many small steps can make big change happen, that we don't need to immediately take a giant leap, that small steps are okay. For example, the government of India has set a really aggressive, bold, audacious goal to provide clean drinking water and sanitation services to your entire population. Right now you're almost like 60% of the population covered. Some may look at that and say, gosh, we're moving too slowly. Some may look at that and say, this is a disaster. But the truth is 60% more than you had when you were at zero. And it's still progress. I think we need to acknowledge that small steps on a pathway forward are incredibly critical to achieving these big, bold goals. The second is I wanted to do something where I could take my feet, where we didn't need to have huge amounts of technology to have people join. And one of the brilliant things that happened yesterday when I was out running is we had hundreds of people join me using their feet too to help to grow this global movement of people around the world, to start to say, we, the people, care about this issue of water. And we, the people, the shareholders, the voters, the people living in the places that governments govern and companies service, we want action. We want action from all of them. And we're prepared to do whatever it takes to make that action happen. And then the final thing is I want to show the power that we have as individuals to do far more than we think is possible. When I set out to run 200 marathons, I don't think of myself as a runner, right? So when I was a little kid, I was the last person picked for a sports team. I didn't grow up running. I came to running really late in life, and I'm really bad at it. Ask anybody that ran with me yesterday. I'm bad at running. I'm slow. It's not my natural space. But I do it because I have the capacity to use it to bring attention to this issue and to show that when we are determined enough, when we are focused enough on something, we can do anything. And I think that's my big message for government officials, for people in the halls of power of companies, to say no excuses. Right? We can do hard things. I know change is challenging. I know that creating these bold, audacious goals around water, around conservation, around protecting our planet. I know that these things are hard, but when we focus and when we work together, anything is possible. No matter how hard it is, no matter how hard it seems. I can tell you, running 200 marathons is really hard. I've torn muscles. I've been all this week, I've been incredibly sick. I've had gut problems. I've had all kinds of problems that started in Vietnam and I brought with me to India. But every time I think about stopping, I remind myself we can do hard things. And I put on my running shoes and I get out there. And that is the message I want to give to everybody who's got the power to do something on water, which is every single one of us. No excuses. We can do hard things, and together we can solve this global water crisis, no matter how long it takes.
Obviously, one of the things we've seen happen of late is there has been a lot of talk about deforestation, right? I mean, that is a conversation everyone is now ready to have. But why do you believe that same sort of conversation is not being had on the water crisis? I mean, one would imagine they're both linked in a certain sense.
Yeah, they're very linked. It's the same as climate change. We see climate change all over the media and in the news, and we talk about it, but we forget that climate change is water change and climate risk is water risk. So when we talk about climate change, the place we're going to experience it first is through water. More droughts, more floods, water falling in places that we're not equipped to capture it. You've seen it right here in India and in neighboring countries. I've seen it in my home country of Australia, where we've just gone through an incredibly terrible period of amazing floods after a couple of years ago going through incredible drought, which led to enormous wildfires. These situations are going to become more, they're going to pop up more and more in the future. And I think what we need to realize is that we talk about these things in isolation, but the truth is that water pervades all of them. We talk about deforestation making front page news, but our wetlands are disappearing 3 times faster than our forests. And our wetlands are a critical element of our water cycle. You talked before about people, here in India. It happens all over the world, right? One of the things I've realized as I've run all over the world is these are not isolated incidents for places like India. These actually happen everywhere, which is that in the big cities, we turn on a tap and in the vast majority of places, water comes out. And we forget that water does not come from a tap. Water comes from a healthy ecosystem. And that healthy ecosystem needs forests, it needs wetlands, it needs an entire functioning natural system in order for us to get that water coming out of those taps. I think that getting some level of understanding that all of these issues are linked together, and the one mainstream element that goes right across all of them is water. I think the other thing I wanted to also raise is just talking about the people who live in big cities and the fact that we've become so disconnected from the problems that exist on the ground. Because I think what happens in big cities is that we think that the water crisis is someone else's problem. Here in Delhi, it's easy to think that the water problem exists in villages. I've been to the villages. I've met the women and girls walking hours each day to go and fetch water. I've talked to the farmers who don't have enough water. This water crisis in those villages is real. But we must remember that we are also impacted by that water crisis, because water goes into everything we use, we buy, and we consume every single day. Only a very small proportion of the water that we use is that water in the tap that we just spoke about. The vast majority goes into the things that you're wearing, you're eating, the power that goes into this computer. Just think, just that one outfit that you're wearing, which is very smart, I love it, but just that one outfit will take more water to make than all the water you drink before you're 40 years old, right? All the water that went into that one outfit is more water than you will drink before you're 40. And the reality of that is that water didn't come into a shop or into the place next door. That water was used on a farm to grow the cotton or to grow the sheep that created the wool that went into your sweater. We forget that water powers everything until it's gone. And once it's gone, then we finally start to appreciate, actually, we had a problem, we didn't do anything about it. Water is everything, but for too long, we've treated it as if it's nothing. And we need to get to a stage where that changes. And all of us everywhere appreciate the value of water and are working together to protect it, whether we are companies, whether we are governments, or whether we're individuals. We are doing whatever it takes within our power to protect our water supplies.
So has this been a conversation that's been easy to have with people? Do you believe that many of them just think, oh, it's the government's job to sort of ensure that we have water and we really don't need to do too much about it? It's not something that we need to worry about at a personal level. You know, we're paying our taxes. The government needs to make sure we all have our water. Is that the sort of conversation you have? Or do you believe that there are people who are actually out there who sort of understand where you're coming from and do realize that this is a very personal sort of challenge that all of them need to take up?
There's two elements to this, right? So first of all, we have to remember that everybody, even in decision makers, even government officials, are individuals. They're all people. So there are two groups of people that I generally speak to. One are the CEOs and very, very high level government officials. And the other one are the people like us that come for a run, that have an opportunity to speak with, or the farmers, or the mums and dads, the kids, people across the world. So let's address each one of those, because the attitude and the change that I'm asking them to make is different. So for the CEOs and for the government officials, so let's call them the people in the corridors of power, or the people in the boardrooms. Okay, they have the capacity through their companies to make significant change. Remember, companies represent almost 90% of global freshwater use, either directly or indirectly. We can use Bayer as an example, right? Bayer, one company, their value chain touches 20% of global freshwater use. So if we can get a company like Bayer and companies like them to step up and say, you know what, water is a major issue. We need to do something. We need to invent and create and innovate better seeds so that farmers can grow crops using less water. We need different pesticides so that you don't need to spray a pesticide on a crop with a huge amount of water, or a pesticide that doesn't pollute the rivers and waterways, or ways that we can help these farmers to produce more from surface water without having to pull the groundwater out from underneath the surface. If we can find companies that understand the challenge that we're facing, understand the urgency of this, and are willing to take action, then we can create systemic, major, catalytic change. And I think the opportunity for India, if I'm really honest, is to say, which companies do we have in one of the most water scarce countries in the world that can stand up and say, look what we are doing to innovate. Look what we are doing to be leaders in this issue. Come join us. Then I think that we start to create a wave and a momentum for change. And I think that similar opportunity exists for your government. In 2023, this year, in March, there will be the first United Nations Conference on Water in almost 50 years. 50 years since we've ever had a conference like this. Ridiculous that it's taken so long, but here we are. This conference is an opportunity for governments to step up and say, we must act on water, and this is what we need to do. And I think that is an opportunity for your government, your prime minister, your entire spectrum of states to step up and say, we are India. We are one of the most water scarce countries in the world. We see these challenges. We feel them every day. And this is what we need to do to solve them. And I think with India taking on the G20 presidency and the G20 being held right here in September, this is an even bigger opportunity to put India onto the world map and to say, this is something we care about. This is something the world should care about. Because here's the thing. India doesn't eat all the rice that you produce. India doesn't use all the cotton that you grow. It's used by people all over the world. So this is, again, not just an India problem. This is a problem for the whole world. And that is why I'm running here. And that is what I want to see India and the companies here in this amazing country do. But it won't happen without people, because individuals, every single one of us, we are voters. So we have a stake in what the government does. We are consumers. So we have a vote in companies and in directing and pushing companies to do things. This is not about going on the street and creating protest. This is about saying, what can I do to push my government to stand up and say, this is a major issue, we need to act. And I think that is the question I ask for every single one I meet. What can you do to convey a message to your government, to the companies that you purchase from, to say water is an issue we care about, please act.
At the end of the day, the way you put things, I think a lot of this also comes down to creating pathways. What is it that the big companies do that the others can then sort of follow? What is it that the government does that, just allows others to come in and just follow that kind of stuff? Is that something that you also help them on? Creating sustainable sort of pathways, something that's actually doable over a period of time?
Yes. So there are 3 things we're asking companies to do. The first one is to assess their water risk, to look at where they're exposed in water. The second, and there are free tools to do this. So it's actually quite easy. It doesn't matter if you have 1 or 2 employees or if you have hundreds of thousands of employees. This is a simple thing to do. So first, assess your risk. The second is understand the gap between where you should be and where you are now. And we have a very simple 6-part framework that companies can look at and say, okay, what am I doing on these 6 things? And how do I compare to others in my space? It's a very, very simple equation. And then the third one is to make a plan. Make a plan of what you're going to do to solve and to close that gap between where you are now and where you should be. And that can be what I'm going to do right now. It can be something simple, just something. As we all know, you don't run a marathon by running 42.2 kilometers. You run a marathon by running one single step at a time. So just do something on water. Take that first step. And then you can create a series of much more aggressive goals as you start to progress down your water pathway. But we need to get people to understand that action on water is not hard. Action on water is quite simple. Just start small. Start with a 1 kilometer and then work your way up to 42.
Indeed. And maybe that's really the kind of message that you're sending, through the marathon every time you run, that it's all about taking that one step and eventually it all counts. If you're actually prepared to just start on the journey, eventually it is something that will make the kind of difference that you want it to make.
That's exactly right. Someone said to me, how do you get through each marathon when you're exhausted or, mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted? And I've had marathons where I've been in tears. I've been sitting beside the road. I've had days that I woke up and I thought, how am I going to do this? And I can tell you how I do it. It's by focusing on one single step at a time. And I take that one step. I'm in the moment. I don't think, my team knows, I don't ever talk about how many kilometers we have left, how many marathons we have to go. We just talk about one single step, one single kilometer at a time. And we focus on that. We get that done. And then we do the next one. And before you know it, it's amazing when you look back. Like now I look back and I go, 153 marathons. When I started this, I didn't even think I could do one. And here we are, 153. So it's really important to me that we understand. And the truth is, it doesn't matter if it's water. It could be water. It could be climate change. It can be even just the goals and objectives each one of us sets in our daily lives. Understanding that no matter how big they are, just take that first step. Just get out there and say, I don't know where it's going to take me. I know where I want to go, know what my end goal is, a marathon, a 5K or 1K, get my kid into a school, like get a better life. It doesn't matter what that thing is. Just progress step by step. Start and then just keep going. And I think the same thing goes for these big global issues, and in this case, water. Just take the first step.
Indeed, sometimes it just takes a movement, to just get people and, get them together behind a cause. And sometimes it all begins from there. We've had movements in the past, like in India, for example, the Chipko movement, when people wanted others to stop cutting trees. So you would have people who would go and hug trees. And, that is something that became a big thing. And that's how people sort of realized that they need to stop doing that. And similarly, I think your endeavor to run these 200 marathons and get 200 companies to actually come forward and start putting their best foot forward, at least when it comes to water conservation, is something that could drive change in its own way.
Yeah, so that's my focus. I think that it's really easy for all of us to just think we're just one person, what can we do? And amongst big population of people on the planet, we often feel very small. But what I want everybody to understand is I'm just one person. When I started running in the desert in 2016, in my first run, I was one person on my own in that desert. Now we have people running for water in over 197 countries and territories around the world. What started as me has become a global movement. I'm a kid from Australia. I'm not a runner. I am not anything special, but what I do have is a purpose, a passion, and an absolute desire to see a better world for the next generation. And I think that, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, any one of us is capable of doing great things if only we start. And that is a message I think is really important for everybody who feels small and feels insignificant. Please get out there and take the first step, because you never know who else will join you on that path. You never know who else you will inspire, and you never know who else will join you in your journey forward. And you never know if that one step that you take will end up being a global movement. But if you never try, you will never know. So set out and do the first step.
Indeed. And I think that's how it all needs to begin. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Mina.
Thank you. It's been great chatting. Even though I did most of the talking and you actually did very little of the talking. See, this is what happens when I start talking about my favorite topic, which is, of course, water.
No, you clearly know a lot more about this than I do, but it was enlightening, and hopefully this is something that more people watch and more people get inspired by. I'm sure they're already getting inspired by what you're doing out on the road, but I think the internet will help spread the message even faster.
I think what I've learned not from books, I have learned from people. And I think that, especially here in India, people across the country have a voice, have an opportunity to share their water stories, have an opportunity to step up and raise those voices, showcase your challenges, your concerns, your thoughts. You are very fortunate to be living in an environment where that's welcomed and supported. So I think that if there is a way that people can share their voices, share their comments, their thoughts, their concerns, their stories and connection to water, that is an easy way to start. It's pretty easy just to go on social media and share your thoughts and comments about water and to join our movement. And if there's anyone that wants to join by foot, put their feet on the ground with us, please reach out to me and we'll find a way that we can actually get out there and run together.
Indeed. So you all know what needs to be done. Contact Mina Guli and she'll set you on the right path.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.